I live and grew up in a country where folklore is pretty much real and people genuinely believe in these things, and although I grew up in the city, I still visited my grandparents who live in a very remote place. Suffice to say there are real ancient places and forests in this place, remote locations high in the mountains where you can't really get with anything else other than a helicopter or simply on foot, horse. Around their parts, people or animals get ill, go missing or even die in what the Western civilized world would call unexplained fashion. But here, it's all normal. There are creatures like the werewolf in Cilia, which is like a woman that sucks the blood of animals or humans. My great-granddad killed time-space anomalies, people going missing for days, weeks, years and returning as if nothing happened. UFO sightings, trees growing in strange shapes, goatmen, crossroads demons, rock giants, and much more. It may be because of the primordial energy still flowing in these virgin parts of the world, unpolluted and untampered, but things like witches, I knew an actual, real-life witch, and let me tell you, the folk stories are nowhere near as creepy as reality. Wise women, men, curses, ancient ritual, evil eye, deadly intent are not unheard of. Now, don't think magic as in fireballs, but more like bad luck sort of things, or unfortunate accidents, illness, animals dying, etc. I'm sure we all know a few examples. Some of these things were or are investigated by amateurs as well as professionals, but it's really hard to get anything done. Still, there are many pics and vids as well as witness testimonies. Even so, few things go outside our small, remote communities, and the more mainstream happenings are only reported because they happen near large cities. Like I said, for the Western world with their huge cities and urban landscapes, these things are paranormal and unheard of, but here it's all real, although rare, and a lot of things are only heard of in really remote places where my village is. Just so you get an idea of how remote some of these places are, people don't know what internet is. They never heard of it, and people still travel in between towns by foot or horses, carriages, and don't use cars, and at night you literally hear wolves just on the other side of the door. Okay, the introduction is done, just so you have a clear picture in mind of the environment. By the way, after I told you my story and you wish to know more about the things happening here or folk stories or about the monsters in the woods, you can ask freely and I'll answer. A long time ago I had a very good friend that lived in the village where my grandma also lived. She was my best friend in the entire world and nothing could tear our friendship apart. I mean, I would literally cry after the holidays were over and I had to go back home for school and all that, and during the summer vacation, I would go to my grandma from day one and spend all my summer there. She was uneducated because there is no school nearby and her parents didn't afford to send her to live in a city for school. Even so, she was smart and witty, in a native sort of way. This village was a very awesome place. A small village atop a hill, surrounded by forests and fields as far as you can see. It was literally just a road and houses one side and the other. No kids were there except for my friend and her family. There were 2 springs nearby, important. One was further away, one was rather close to the village. You only had to go down through the forest in front of my grandma's house, get to the edge of it and you could see a hole carved into a stone from which cool water poured into a small pond. The water was really cold and I remember we dared each other to see who can keep their hands in water the most. It was fun times, and since once it got past midday, our grandmothers wouldn't let us out anymore, so we went to that spring to drink water when we were thirsty and didn't want to go home. Anyway, the story begins one day when we were really thirsty after helping my friend gather all the chicken and birds from the road. Since going home to drink water would basically just be my grandma say stay in the yard, don't go back in the forest, it's late, we decided to go to our spring to wash, drink some water, play, etc. We got to the spring and the first thing I noticed was that the pond was really dirty with green algae, there were a lot of frogs and bugs and the spring was dry, no water came out. It was weird because it rarely ever happens, only when there is no rain for weeks at a time, and even then, there is still some water. No problem, we were kids and kinda stupid, and instead of going home and just chill in the yard or play with animals and have a warm meal, we decided to go to the second spring, which was far away from the village. We also didn't tell our parents, grandparents where we went, since my friend kinda just suggested on the spot, hey, I don't wanna stay in the yard yet and I'm really thirsty and sweaty. I know, let's go to Geralta, the name of the second spring. We climbed back to the main road that leads towards another village a few kilometers away, only that about halfway through, you must leave the road and go through the fields, enter a forest, and on the other side there's the spring. I have many stories about that road between the two villages, but I won't tell them now, not enough space. Just ask me after if you want to know. We were on our way to the spring, took left and walked through the fields towards the Crow Forest, the name of that forest where the second spring is. That forest is really creepy, again, lots of stories about it. It was past midday when we decided to go. I think it was about 3 to 4 p.m. even though we had no clock, and by the time we got there, it was starting to get dark, say 8 to 9 p.m. Keep in mind it was summer so it was still pretty much day, but that meant it would be night when we got back home. Still, we were kids and stupid and didn't think about it. We got to the spring, we washed, we drank a lot of water, we chilled in the shade, and when we saw it's getting late and the sun already set behind the hills, I decided to finally get back home. As expected, we barely got back into the forest towards the fields and it already went dark. We knew our way well and we quickly got out of the forest. We had to go straight up from the spring, take a left and then go forward until you get to the fields. Then through the fields you go straight ahead until you see some trees. There are many trees, but we knew which ones to look after, and then we got the road. Once at the road, you go right, and you eventually get to the village. It got dark very fast and we started to panic and eventually we got lost because the fields is a large area. We couldn't see the trees that mark where the road is, so we just wandered around until we heard some barks and we got scared, ran off and climbed a tree. After about an hour or so, maybe less, we climbed down and started to run. Eventually, we saw a large tree and we got towards it. We thought it marked the road, it didn't, and as we got close to it, we heard the barks again, this time nearby. We climbed on it and stayed there for another while until my friend remembered where we were. At the end of the story I'll speak my mind about what I think it actually happened, but for now, let me continue the story. As I was saying, my friend remembered where we were, and apparently an old man named Eliza lived nearby. I never knew this Eliza, but hey, my friend lived there, so whatever, she knows the place better. We climbed down and ran and soon after we saw Eliza's house. It seemed occupied and had a fence and gate to enter the yard, so we entered. My friend knocked on the door and called Eliza, but no man responded. Instead there was an old woman who said Eliza is gone tonight and asked what do we want. We told her who we were. My friend said the name of her parents and grandparents, well-known people in the area, and I said the name of my grandparents. This woman asked if we're lost and we said yes, that we got lost on our way from Geralta. We heard the barking again and she told us to get in fast because night's no time for two little girls to be wandering around, and that the werewolves will eat us. Not a good translation of course, but here is a common saying here if someone gets lost. The saying goes basically may the werewolves not eat you or something like that. Anyway we got in and she served us some boiled corn with salt to eat. We went fast to sleep, but then I began to be aware of every sound and movement in the house. I got irrationally annoyed by my friend who also woke up for some reason. We started to argue for no reason, each saying that it's their fault that we got lost, and let me sleep, and get lost and things like that. My friend pushed me, I pushed her and soon we started to hit each other and scream and yell. My friend grabbed a fork and tried to hit me in the eye but only got my hair tangled and started to pull. I grabbed a wooden spoon and started to hit her in the head and back. We pretty much smacked each other all night and we yelled some very cruel and obscene things. Note, we both are from Christian families and even now as an adult, I almost never swear. But we were like rabid dogs right then. There was barking outside and we started to blame each other for stupid things like you called the dogs here to get me killed and eaten and things like that. The woman who we thought was Eliza's wife never got out to separate us, she just kept on sleeping. It all ended when I yelled, and I quote myself as best as I can, translated into English. I curse you and all your life. You will never be loved and accepted, you will always live an empty life and no one will ever love you and protect you. This was coming from a kid self, so it's pretty disturbing just to think about it. I mean I was a kid, yet my curse was thus. It's pretty scary to think about that night, even now, so many years after. It was like I wasn't myself and the words coming out of my mouth were not really mine. Immediately after this, my friend calmed down and fell asleep. So did I. The next morning we woke up and the woman was still sleeping. We decided not to wake her up, and since my friend claimed she knew where we were, we left the house. Back on the fields and on daylight, it was clear we got lost pretty bad. After about an hour or more of wandering, we saw the edge of the Crow Forest and we heard someone yell something. I didn't understand exactly what, but he, or she, said something about wolves. I got really scared and ran away, leaving my friend behind. I climbed a tree and waited there for maybe half an hour. When I climbed down, I saw my father in the distance running towards me with an axe. He hugged me, grabbed me and carried me back towards the others. My mom, and some family friends, my friend's parents and uncle. They were all very worried and searched all day and night. When I asked about anyone yelling something about wolves, they said none of them heard anything or yelled anything of the sorts. They already found my friend at that point. She was all bloody but had no bite marks, and she said she just fell down and scraped her knees and elbows. We got back home, washed, ate and told everyone what happened. They were all surprised to hear about this Elijah man, but our grandparents knew someone who lived there. They said they thought he was already dead a long time ago. My grandma also did her ritual prayers and weird folk stuff. She also said the next year she will ask the village witch, she was a very old lady in our village who healed and was generally very knowledgeable, to do something. At this point the story is kinda over. I will only add that the following year we did go to this witch lady and did the thing. She made 2 crowns of certain flowers. I think the English name is bedstraw, one for each of us, my friend and I. Then she did some chanting and praying and threw the flowers over her house. This ritual is common around these parts, but in our particular village, the higher the crown of flowers falls on the house, the more the person will live. In our case, my crown of flowers fell on the house, which is quite normal, meaning I will continue living, but the crown of my friend rolled down the house and fell back on the ground. The witch laughed and pushed us out of her yard, saying this is just old superstitions. My friend cursed this old woman and said some very bad things. Here comes the part where I talk about the things that followed and my analysis of the event. A few days later, my grandpa got restless and went to find Elijah in his house because he could swear he was long dead. He found the house, but of course no one was inside. Instead, and this is very disturbing and was even reported to the police in the nearest town, he did found Elijah. Just that Elijah was not in the house, he was in the backyard. The corpse seemed only a few days old tops, and his tongue was cut out. The winter following that, my grandpa got very sick and died. A few years later, especially after got more and more into occult and magic, I went to the village witch and asked about the flower crown ritual. She said exactly what I told you here, that the higher the crown on the roof of the house, the higher you will live. And when I asked what about my friend and why did her crown fall down, she said that my friend is already dead. Still, my friend was pretty much alive, if terribly changed. Not days after the happening, we weren't friends anymore. Something pulled us apart. Because of this, I visited the village less and less, no more than a few days a year, just to see my grandpa and nothing more. Not only that, we even seemed to hate each other. Something did indeed happen that night, and I'm afraid of even thinking about it. Shortly after that, the witch died too. Like my grandma said, she was one of the last witches, and I believe her. The father of my friend also nearly died, but someone found him in the fields. They said he had his tongue swallowed when they found him, which I can't really imagine how that happened. Thinking back, I think we stumbled upon some sort of evil spirit or demon bound to that spring, and it all started when we saw the spring being dried out. Instead of simply turning back, we decided to go to the other spring, which basically sent us down the road of doom, so to speak. Also, the curse I yelled at my friend backfired. My life became progressively worse after that summer. I started to become bullied at school, my grades were at an all-time low, I've never been in a relationship with anyone ever, and not because I'm ugly or socially inept. I just feel that I exist on a different frequency. Like something changed that night, and basically everything I told it would happen to her backfired onto me. The relation with my parents dropped, I entered what I call the dark age of my life. Absolutely nothing went right. For a while I said it's because I was becoming an angsty teenager, but then again, so were all my friends, my sister, schoolmates. Yet only I seemed to be into this deep pool. I did some research and talked with some wise people back in the village, and they all pretty much said it was because I tried to fight back a demon, but since the demon was more powerful than I, the curse backfired. My friend apparently never tried to fight back this demon, thus she became possessed and lost her soul. Once I learned that, everything seemed to fall into place, since everything we did from the moment we saw the dried up spring we did at her behest. Thinking back, everything, from her suggestion to go to the second spring without telling our parents, to her knowing where Eliza lived, to her starting the fight, it all seemed to fall into place. Another thing that got me thinking was, why was she bloody after the siblings found us? She said she fell down and scraped her knees and elbows, which is not impossible. At the time no one questioned it, of course, but it really got me thinking. Could be that it was the moment when the demon replaced her physical body or possessed her truly? There was indeed a period of time when we were separated. Another thing, she suddenly became very fat in a short time and stayed fat ever since. It was such a sudden transformation, everyone in the village wondered what happened to her. Kids can get fat during puberty even if they are naturally skinny, but usually lose their weight once they get older. She also started to argue very hard with her parents, to the point where they started to beat each other up. I tell you, something really changed that night. I'm a skeptic at heart. I don't believe videos, pictures, or sometimes even the things I see with my own eyes, but this is something that happened that I can't deny its effect yet on my and my friend's life. The curse is ongoing, and I've since decided to live a pretty secluded life with minimal contact because it never led to anything good, no matter how much I tried. I've also checked with a psychiatrist and I'm mentally sound and healthy, physically as well. In my case, aside from the sudden change in my life after that night, nothing really changed. I'm both physically and mentally healthy. I finished high school successfully despite having no friends or acquaintances, joined a high-prestige university, and I'm currently studying architecture. Again, I'm quite a skeptic, and I know that many people go through life with few or no friends, no relationships, no loved ones, but I can pinpoint the moment when it all started, and it had an undeniable effect on both our lives. This is where my story ends. I can say I'm content with my life and can't really complain about anything, but what happened keeps me awake at night sometimes. Next I'll try to share my thoughts about Eliza, his wife, his death, my grandpa's death, the witch's death, and my friend's father near-death experience. I welcome you to start a discussion about what truly happened and share your opinions. Was it a demon, a curse placed there like a trap for the next person to fall in, the effects of tiredness, or something else? This Eliza man was obviously very old, since only the old people, grandparents, great-grandparents, etc., in the village knew him, and of course my friend. In retrospect, I think my friend never knew Eliza, and it was simply the demon talking about it or giving her the knowledge of that place, so we could go there, since stumbling upon us was unlikely. Then, the woman at Eliza's place was his wife because people knew he had a wife as well, and I really can't imagine anyone else being there. If she was also dead and we saw a ghost or apparition, it had to be his wife, because why would it take the form of another random person we knew nothing about? The disturbing part is that Eliza's corpse was right there behind the house. It could have been older than my grandpa thought, or fresher, but the fact is, there was the corpse of Eliza behind the house with his tongue cut out and the wife nowhere to be seen. What I think it was, since I have already decided that this happened because of a demon or evil spirit, is that it, whatever it was, either needed a body, blood, a sacrifice, or something. Possibly it needed young blood after it killed Eliza and discovered that whatever it wanted didn't work. Either way, I think we were brought to that place to be killed, if not both of us, then one of us. When it didn't work, me fighting back with the curse, it tried to separate us as a last resort, so it yelled something or caused me to hear things so I could get away from my friend. It could also explain why I stared to run and my friend never followed, and why were we so easily separated. Next, my grandpa died exactly the following winter. He died in the hospital due to some liver problem. Then died the witch. I don't know how she died, only that when I visited my grandma next, she just told me the news. What truly scared me is the circumstances of my friend's father experience. According to the people who found him, he was out in the fields, collapsed. He didn't breathe and had his tongue swallowed. They literally said he had his tongue swallowed. I don't know how that even happens since I have no medical knowledge. My question is, Why did he have his tongue swallowed and why was he in the fields? Was he on his way to Eliza's house as well and something stopped him from discovering something? Or he was on his way back home and something tried to kill him? Nothing was said on the subject afterwards. I only know that it was during the summer. Also, those fields seem haunted. There's pretty much always the smell of decayed flesh and only weird stuff happen around. Many people got lost, some for days or weeks. I mean, I can see how you can get lost tonight, when it's dark and all, but days or weeks. Something's just not right with that place. Tell me your thoughts. I'll be online pretty much the whole night so I'll be able to respond to questions and provide feedback. Also, if it's too long to read, then please don't start shitposting. If it's too long and can't be arsed to read a real story that actually happened, and you don't want to provide genuine insight, then please at least leave this thread in peace, okay?